for tuning into the back page. It is Wednesday, September 6th, and this is episode 2, hosted by Collin Crisp and
Carter Sims. Today, we're going to be talking about some recent Hayes athletics results, the kickoff of college football, and at the end, we'll have a little bit of NFL talk for kickoff this weekend. Most recently for football, on last Friday, the Pacers defeated Mount Vernon 42-0. For girls soccer, last week they lost to Big Nut 2-0 on Tuesday, but rebounded against Thomas Worthington, winning 2-0. Last night, boys soccer beat Central Crossing with a score of 3-1 and will play Westerville North on Thursday. And girls volleyball got their first win of the season against Worthington Kilbourne and will play Westerville South tomorrow. The biggest story of the weekend, though, is the kickoff of college football.
I think there would be no other fair way to start it off but with the local Ohio State team getting their first win of the season. It may have not been the prettiest win, but defensively it was, as it was 23-3 over Indiana. It was the first time we had held a team to 3 or less points in 4 years. But offensively, our team showed some signs of a need of growth.
Yeah, I think there's been varying levels of concern for this Ohio State team early, which I think there is every year. I mean, we saw early in C.J. Stroud's tenure a lot of kind of panic buttons being pushed about the quarterback situation then, and I think by the time that the season was over, both of those years we kind of felt resolved about a lot of those issues. But I think early on it's just been so concerning to see that the quarterback controversy is going on this late and still isn't completely resolved, especially now that we're hearing that we'll probably see both quarterbacks between Kyle McCord and Devin Brown taking snaps this upcoming Saturday. I think that kind of lack of direction is throwing a lot of people into this zone of extreme, everything from fire Ryan Day to just trust the process and everything kind of in between. But where are you, concern level with this Ohio State Buckeye team?
Mine's not very high. I think that we'll be okay. For me, a lot of people say when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. But I'm not one that agrees with that philosophy. I feel like Alabama and Oklahoma's recent years have just disproven that lately. Now, I'm not saying it's not a possibility, but I do think that it's unlikely. I think if whether we go Kyle McCord or Devin Brown, I think it'll end up being McCord in the end, that Ryan Day is going to make a transformation out of whatever the offense is now. We've seen it happen prior. And if the defense continues to look as good as they did week 1, which we're not going to draw a conclusion because it's one game, but it is bringing of hope, then I have faith that Ryan Day can get the offense looking like it did. And if the defense stays like that, it should be a contender team.
Yeah, I think anytime you hold a team to a field goal, that's something to be proud of, at least one phase of the ball. But I think it's just so much of a concern when someone who's generally considered one of, if not the best college football player in the country, Marvin Harrison Jr., when he's on your team and on your offense, and your offense looks as disjointed as it did last Saturday, it's kind of concerning that maybe not wasting it, but you're not getting full use out of all the talent that you have.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, going into the season, if you looked at any top 10 receivers in college football right now, Marvin Harrison and, I may butcher this, but Ibuka,
Emeka Ibuka,
yeah, him. They were always 1-2, just about on any of those lists. And Cade Stover led the offense in receiving yards. So I do think that there is definitely a lot of potential out there on the field. I just have a lot of faith in Ryan Day that by the time the first month of the season's over, that he'll have at least gotten much closer to being able to utilize all of that potential.
And I think the fact that this Indiana's kind of controlling the narrative a little bit. I mean, we didn't look great against Notre Dame last year either. So I don't think it's time to for any fire Ryan Day chance or anything like that.
I agree.
But the thing is, we'll have Western Kentucky.
This week's Youngstown State.
Youngstown State and then Western Kentucky. And the Buckeyes should put up at least 50 points in both of those games. And so these concerns won't even appear relevant for the next 2 weeks. And the real test is really going to be Notre Dame in week 4 when you go into South Bend. So, yeah, I think having time against maybe some opponents that obviously will provide a test but aren't Power 5 aren't the type of team that you're going to see all year. Kind of provide some comfort and maybe a little bit of direction in the quarterback position. But the real star of the weekend, I think, has to be Colorado.
Oh, yeah. Like, if we're going for a most improved team candidate, they definitely are the favorite as of right now.
They've already matched their win total of last season.
Yeah, which is hilarious. I mean, they started against a ranked team, but they were a 21-point underdog and ended up beating TCU 45-42, led by an all-time great performance by Deion Sanders' son. Is it Shadir? Is that how you say that?
It's Shador,
It's Shador Sanders, who broke the school record in his first game in passing yards, 510, and had 4 touchdowns. Offensively, it was just a masterclass.
Yeah, I think for me the star of the game has to be Travis Hunter, though. Going both ways, that guy was the best player on the field for probably basically everything that was on special teams by the end of the game. So I think Colorado symbolizes kind of the change in college football right now. When you look at the way that program kind of rebuilt in the past 9 months or so, after hiring Deion Sanders, having a massive exodus and kind of refresh in the transfer portal, and you look at what they're doing in terms of playing their star both ways of the ball, kind of giving their quarterback freedom, having guys, I mean, even little things like having guys' Instagram tags on the back of their practice jerseys. Like, I think this Colorado team is really going to be kind of a trendsetter in college football. We're going to see that whether you like the transfer portal or not, or whether you like NIL or not, it's just the way to win in college football right now. And so I don't know how this team will do, by the end of the season. Obviously, there's a lot we have to see. But this is a team, I think, for better or for worse, a lot of people are going to be tuning into each week just to watch the football that's being played by this program. And granted, this is against a TCU team that a lot of people might have a little bit of residual confidence in because of their national championship appearance last year. And you still don't really know who everyone is week 1. Like, once we kind of get to week 3, week 4, that's where you start to see teams' identities. But, for better or for worse, like entertainment value, Colorado is probably the best watch in the country right now.
Yeah, I think that, this may sound like a bit of an overstatement, but I do think that if Colorado does good this year, there's potential for this. Right now, we are in a stage of college football where we allow coaches time. Right now, Billy Napier at Florida has been given time. Shane Beamer at South Carolina has been given time. If Deion Sanders manages to pull this off and they have they go from 1 win to 5 or 6 by the end of the year, we may have athletic directors out there across the nation looking for their Deion Sanders. Well, look what he's doing, Colorado.
Yeah, I just think that's kind of a slippery slope, though, because you can look for your Deion Sanders, but you're not hiring Deion Sanders. I mean, this is a guy who had success at Jackson State and really his first big, coaching gig in college football. Not immediately, but 2 years of success at Jackson State. A lot of the kids on this team he's known since they were 6, 7 years old playing, Little League football for him. Like, you can't just copy the relationships and the ability to interact that he's composed with the staff and with this roster. Because I think both aspects of the way he's built this team, coaching and player-wise, has been really impressive in what they've done. But as far as, the style that they're doing it with NIL and transfer portal, people complain all the time. SEC coaches especially like to complain all the time about the transfer portal and how it's not really college football anymore. But I think this is just this is just the new standard now. And I don't see any reason that Colorado stops anytime soon.
Oh, me either. If they don't have a talent at a certain position they need, they've already shown that they can go get it.
Yeah. And
from here, I don't know where they'll be defensively because they did allow 42 points to TCU, which I think they're not going to be as good as they were last year. I don't think that's a hot take, but offensively, I think they have the firepower to overrun anyone who doesn't have a good defense.
Yeah. And even surface level, this team is just cool. Everything about this team is cool. Their colors are cool. The way they play is cool. Even they don't have captains patches on their jerseys. They have a D and an L for leader and dog, which everything
so
about
cool.
that is just so I don't know. That's just fun.
Mm-hmm.
So
It is fun.
yeah, no matter what, we could see them fizzle out and lose in a conference championship and not quite make the last four, or we could see them run the table for all we know. But yeah, this is definitely a team to watch for a long time in college football.
I do think that there doesn't, like you saying with the conference championship thing, that's very much like a recalibration of expectation.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, even if they don't make a bowl game, if they go like 5-7 and get a couple upsets along the way, I think that alone's impressive compared to where they were last year. Like, I think that if next year that's like the realm they could be in, but for this year, like having a winning record would just be astounding out of this Colorado team. They've been terrible before this year.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for Colorado's performance, I think that North Carolina would be getting the shine for like most improved team looking week one. Just defensively, we've known for a long time that North Carolina has a really good offense. Drake May has been a dog down there for a couple of years now, and before him, Sam Howell was too. But defensively is where they've always fell apart. They've lost to group of 5 teams thanks to their bad defense. But this year, we may have a change of way, as they beat South Carolina 31-17 on opening week, and they had 9 sacks. It was a defensive front-led performance. And out of the South Carolina team, that's supposed to be a really good running of the ball team. It was really impressive. They had double digits tackle for losses if you take out the sacks. It's really crazy what they're doing up there in front 7 in 1 year.
I think we'll get into this later, but especially considering how the weekend went across the conference, the ACC could be UNC's for the taking. I mean, a lot about this team. You talked about the defense. You talked about how good Drake May is, and even their coach. Like Mac Brown is, I think, the first coach to have 100 wins at 2 different programs.
Yes,
having 100 wins at Texas, and now got his 100th win at UNC. So obviously, week 1 you can always overreact to week 1, but I think UNC one of the biggest winners of the weekend for sure.
Indeed. And speaking of the ACC, as you did, the other ACC team that really showed off was Florida State. The matchup everybody's been looking forward to coming into week 1 was the top 10 matchup between LSU and Florida State. And last year was an instant classic, and neither team was even ranked when it happened.
Yep.
And it was shaping up to look that way at the half as LSU led by a field goal. But the second half was all Florida State. They outscored them 31-7 in the second half and ran away with it. Ended up winning the thing 45-24. Florida State is I don't like talking playoff this early in the season, so I won't do that. But I think they're definitely a contender no matter how the rest of the season goes. They only have one other ranked team on their schedule, that is Clemson. So, I mean, as long as they don't drop that one, I don't think that there's any argument that they could do it now.
I want to focus on the LSU side of things for a minute here, and we'll get back to Florida State, obviously the positive. But where is LSU as a program right now? I mean, there's certain brands in college football. Everyone has their own opinions, but I think that programs that are just synonymous when you think college football, you have your Alabamas, your Ohio States, your Oklahomas, your Notre Dames, your LSUs, like your Oregons, your Florida States, like a lot of just not blue bloods, but teams you see year in and year out. LSU has kind of lost their direction for going on 3 years now, and not under the table, but I don't know how much longer they can kind of continue this, not mediocrity, but disappointment almost in LSU.
I don't know if they were disappointing last year. I think that Brian Kelly went in there in his first year. Everybody was saying that, he won't survive in the South, which I thought was ridiculous. I mean, from all the criticisms against Brian Kelly was ridiculous, between the accent thing and the recruiting videos and all that. None of that is how good you are at coaching.
Well, neither is throwing your team under the bus after losing to
I agree with that as well. But in regards to Brian Kelly last year, he overperformed expectations. And, if going into this season, we saw this with South Carolina last year, that when a first-year head coach overperforms, sometimes he stays neutral, and then everyone calls it a disappointment. But just because you overperformed in your first year doesn't mean that in your second year, if you end up being neutral, that you're a disappointment. And like them losing to Florida State is not like some big astounding thing. That's a really, really good team.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. That just kind of felt like a gut punch on week 1 at least to watch that.
It was bad. That was real bad. But like LSU's going to be in wounded animal mode now. That's a thing I really believe in.
Yeah.
I saw it with Ohio State when they lost to Virginia Tech and
Yeah.
then end up with backup quarterback winning the whole thing. And since I saw that happen, I've been like a hardcore believer in it. And going throughout the rest of the season, I don't think that LSU is a team to be counted out. Like, they have the talent to do it. They have the rushing attack to do it, the passing to do it, and they have a great defense. There's not a just major hole in that team. It's just a matter of bringing it all together.
Yeah.
And I think Brian Kelly can do that.
It could be worse. They could be Clemson, who just lost to Duke last
Yes.
week, so.
Like, that's the thing to really be concerned about. If you're a Clemson fan and you see them lose to Duke, that's like, if you're like sitting there screaming, the season's over, I get it. If you're losing to Florida State, a top 10 team in week 1, like not at your own site either, I think that like, it could be much worse.
And yeah, it's always hard, like I said, it's always hard to judge week 1 on which of these results you can trust. But let's say out of the few games we talked about, so we had Ohio State, Colorado, UNC, and Florida State. Which of these teams do you see like kind of sustaining this level of play for the longest? Like, which teams do you trust the most based on their performance?
Well, I think that Ohio State's going to grow, so I don't think they'll stay where they're at now. I don't trust Colorado to be that perfect offensively every week. I think they'll be good, but I don't think that was like perfect. I don't think they'll be able to do that every week. North Carolina, 9 sacks a week's pretty rough ask.
Yeah.
So that kind of leaves us with Florida State. And with their second half performance offensively was just immaculate. Like, it was so good. And then defensively, they shut them down. If they can have that second half cohesion that they have week in and week out, like, that's a playoff team.
Yeah, and I mean, there'll be teams that fly up the board in week 6 and 7, like there is every year, and there'll be teams that will have a bad performance right before their last game of the season that are kind of in this upper echelon that might change our opinion of things going into the playoff. And obviously, all we have is week 1 right now, but I think when you look at kind of the bigger victories of the weekend, a lot of the teams that you are hesitant on, you're hesitant on because you have more expectations of them. But I still think that these teams can meet expectations. Just like Florida State, like I know that obviously they've had a big win over LSU, but was Clemson going down? Like, is this the year that they finally take the ACC? Ohio State, like we said earlier, like we're gonna have a couple games to get comfortable with this offense. So, and, I mean, it's always easy to overreact to week 1, but definitely a lot to kind of keep an eye on in college football.
Even like the teams that played like Division II teams and such, like Georgia, like Carson Beck didn't have the most stunning first half of all time, and even their fan base is like all weary about it, even though it was a week 1 game for a starting quarterback. And like, you can't draw conclusions in week 1, but you can make observations. And I do think there was a lot to observe this week.
Yeah. Coming into next weekend, though, we have end of the long national nightmare with NFL coming back. So we're going to do a little something called a reality check. So I want you to give me one team that you think is going to be better than expected and one team that needs a little reality check that's going to be worse than expected.
My team, I think, will be better than expected, and this is very painful for a Falcons fan like me. But I think the Saints are going to be really good this year. Firstly, they're in a bad division, and I'm just sitting there looking at the Falcons and the Buccaneers and the Panthers and the Saints and thinking somebody's got to take it. And between the Falcons, I think they'll be the second best team in the division, but I don't think that they're just a team that can take it by the throat. And the Panthers aren't going to be that good. I just have no faith in the Buccaneers. And this kind of leaves the Saints. And I think that they'll be really good. They have a really good secondary. Like, their defense is really, really stout. They'll be a very physical defense to where you will not be able to just outman them downfield. You won't be able to run the ball down their throat every week. They'll be able to shut you down offensively and give their offense a chance to – they can win a game just by scoring 24, 27 points. And they have the running backs to do it. Their backfield, being with Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams, is really good. And they have the receivers out wide with Chris Olave, and I don't know if Michael Thomas is going to end up playing. But
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how many slant routes he runs preseason.
But if he plays a few, then that's always a good few yards. And I got faith in the new quarterback, so I think that's going to be a really good team this year.
And what's the team you think is going to be a little worse?
The Lions are getting overhyped. I hate to be that way because I root for the Lions, not because I like any Michigan team, but just because I hate seeing a team being eternal purgatory. But their defense is just not it. We knew this last year. They were winning games 48-45, and we were sitting there thinking, well, offensively they're a good team, but if they make it to the playoffs, their defense won't survive.
Yeah.
Their defense hasn't changed. It's the same defense. Their front seven is Aiden Hutchinson and no one, and they do have good safeties, but that doesn't overcome the fact you have no good corners, and that defense is just not it. And the Vikings are a really good team, so that division is not just free.
Yeah.
And I think the Bears will be much improved as well, so those aren't just free wins either. And they have a really difficult schedule if you look outside the divisions as well, and that's not just talking against the home start against the Chiefs. They play the Seahawks and the Ravens. And then even closer to the end of the year, they have the Vikings, Cowboys, Vikings, and Broncos as their last 4 games. That's going to be a difficult schedule for any team, but the Lions especially. I just think that their whole double-digit over/under is a little much.
Yeah. Let's see. Do I want to start positive or negative? I'll start positive. I think the team, for me, that is going to be a little better than expected going into this year is the Seattle Seahawks. And they're a little bit like the Lions, where pretty nice offensive pieces. Defense can be questionable sometimes, but I still think they're on a good trajectory right now, especially with the acquisition they made. Obviously, I love the Jackson Smith and Jigba pick, and I'm very biased in that. But when you look at their situation, they have a lot of winnable games early. So they start out against the Lions, and that's kind of a debate of two sides that we just talked about. And then you get the Panthers. And the Giants and Bengals is going to be a tough stretch. But then you go Cardinals, Browns, take the Ravens, and then Commanders, Rams, and then you get the 49ers. I could see them having, 5 wins by the end of that stretch.
Yeah.
So it's not always about how you start in the NFL, obviously, but
it does help.
I just think this is a team that could surprise a lot of people. And I'm not saying that they're going to win the NFC West because I think it's kind of generally assumed that San Francisco is still the top dog in that conference. But I don't think that there's quite as much space between the teams as there has been in the past. Especially because, Brock Purdy was really fun to watch last year, and obviously went on a tear for them to end the season. But, we don't know if that's sustainable for 17 games at all. And then you look at the other parts of the division. The Arizona Cardinals are a hot mess right now. They don't even know who their quarterback situation is going to be until Kyler Murray's healthy.
Yeah.
Because neither option is really that good. A lot of their team is just residual from a 2021 super team that they tried to build that didn't work. And then you look over at L.A., the Rams. That's I think we said earlier in episode 1, they're just a time bomb waiting to explode and trade valuable pieces to AFC opponents. So I think spots 2, 3, and 4 in that division. I don't see any reason the Seahawks should be not second in their division.
Totally.
And if they get the right playoff matchup, this is a team we could see divisional weekend in the NFC.
Yes.
And then for my negative, a team that I think is going to be a little worse than expected, or at least in the past, is going to be the Buffalo Bills. Not that they're a bad team. Not that they're going to be, scrapping for the 10th place in the NFL. Nothing drastic. But when you look at their division, you have the Miami Dolphins, who started probably the best start to the NFL season last year. And obviously, Tua's injuries played a big part in kind of how they changed. And we don't totally know if we can trust this Dolphins team as a contender yet. But I don't think they've done anything in the offseason to hurt their team, which, sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah.
Then you look at the New York Jets, which I think is kind of the biggest question mark so far. How does Aaron Rodgers fit immediately? And how does that translate to week 13, week 14? And then you just look at the middle class of the AFC. So I think it's pretty mutually agreed that the Chiefs and the Bengals are kind of the two, not S tier, but top teams in the AFC. And I don't think the Bills are lower than 3, but I don't think they're very close to the 2. Like, I think there's a very big gap between whether you think it's the Bengals or the Chiefs. Like, there's a very big gap between those teams and the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that might just be not getting tired, but kind of getting used to seeing the Bills get bounced in important playoff games. I mean, it happened on their home field in a snowstorm against the Bengals last year. Obviously, they've had, the Patrick Mahomes 13 seconds disaster. So, yeah, they're losing to great teams, but nothing about this Bills team is like, oh, yeah, I trust them to be a Super Bowl contender. And then you just look at the teams that they're going to go up against. Obviously, they have their divisional opponents, but then you look at, the Ravens, the Chargers, the Jaguars. Who knows? Maybe the Broncos. Maybe the Colts figured out Jonathan Taylor's healthy by week 6, and they make a little bit of noise, kind of be like that upset team that maybe isn't going to have a great season, but can knock teams down from a higher perch, kind of like Jacksonville did last year. Like, I just don't think that the path for the Bills to be even a division champion in the East right now is very clear at all. So I could see them having a drop off from last year.
That makes sense. Who do you think would take over the top spot in the AFC East if they don't?
I think if anyone would be Miami.
Got it.
Just because I don't know how I feel about New York yet. I think their defense is, something to be like interested in about how they're improving, and it's always easy to judge people off of offenses. But I feel like so much of their offense is, kind of unknown right now. Like, how are the pieces that were brought over with Aaron Rodgers going to fit? How is Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson going to coexist in that same offense? Mm-hmm. And obviously, elite players find a way in every situation they're in. Like, we've seen it with many acquisitions over the years. Like, the Rams threw a team together before the season and went on a great playoff run. We see that all the time. But how long is that going to take? I could just see them setting them back in the East a little bit. Mm-hmm. And Miami, now, obviously the Jalen Ramsey injury hurts, but they have Eli Apple, so do with that what you will. But, yeah, I could see Miami kind of contending with the Bills if the Bills get off to a rough start, especially in AFC games that just sets them back record-wise. Like, I could see the Bills and the Dolphins kind of being the top 2 vying for that top spot in the AFC East.
Thank you for tuning into the episode 2 of The Back Page. You can find our episodes on YouTube and Spotify.